So we know there's been a long history of the intelligence community uh, working hand in hand with Hollywood, right? So there's how Hollywood became the unofficial propaganda arm of the U.S. military. Here's another one. The Pentagon and CIA have shaped thousands of Hollywood movies into super effective propaganda. Closer scrutiny. Now, here's the article we're going to focus on today, and it's written by Alex McLeod over at the MintPress News. He does a lot of great work over there. Closer scrutiny reveals how close to state power Sacha Baron Cohen really is. MintPress reviewed documents and spoke to former CIA agent who worked with Sacha, and here we go. So, for example, here's some of the stuff that they say indicates that Sacha has been getting preferential treatment from the intelligence community. And here's what they say. For example, documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act show that the Department of Defense was involved in the production of the 2009 mockumentary Bruno, wherein Baron Cohen, Sacha, plays a flamboyantly gay Austrian reporter traveling the world in his quest to become more heterosexual. Bruno visits a military base in Alabama. The scenes on the base feel rather staged, with the officers setting him up for a glut of witty one-liners. The production company's version of events is that they lied to the National Guard in order to gain filming permission, and that, after suspecting the military smelled a rat, they hastily fled the base in their vehicle, with the guards chasing them and yelling at them to stop. The car apparently just made it out in time, squeezing under a rapidly closing front gate like an iconic escape scene from the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I bet that's how it happened. Come on. As to the question of why nobody spotted one of the most well-known comedians in the world playing a character that had been around for a decade, the production team said that because of strict discipline at the base, none of the dozens of recruits Bruno interacted with were allowed to speak freely to their superior officers, meaning they were none the wiser. Not everybody is convinced by this exclamation. Tom Secker, an investigative journalist who analyzes the connections between the Pentagon and Hollywood, said this: if the footage was obtained illegally by the production company deceiving the military, which they certainly did, and so it certainly was, then it would have been a relatively simple matter for the Pentagon to prevent them from using it in the final movie. This raises the question of what sort of concessions they gave the military in order to use the footage, or whether the entire encounter was pre-scripted from the start. Bruno was also made with the help of the CIA. In an interview with David Letterman in 2009, Baron Cohen casually stated that a CIA contact had arranged some of the scenes in the movies. The agent in question is John Kiriakou, our guest today, who became a public figure after he blew the whistle on the agency's use of torture in Iraq. He's now an author and radio show host. When asked about the national security state's role in shaping pop culture, the former intelligence officer said that it is far more cynical than most people realize, explaining there is a branch inside the CIA's Office of Public Affairs whose job is solely to work with Hollywood studios. This is something that the FBI has been doing since the 40s. They'll cooperate and give the red carpet treatment to any Hollywood studio that's willing to make the CIA look good. So let me just say, since Bruno was filmed, this level of CIA involvement in Hollywood has escalated thanks to the passage of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, which legalized the use of government propaganda on the U.S. public.
What does that mean?
Absolutely true.
What that then does is it allows the likes of the CIA to assist Hollywood studios in making pro-CIA films, Kiriakou explained, noting that many top TV shows and movies, all of which show the agency in a good light and perpetrate falsehoods such as torture being an essential part of keeping America safe, are now made with the CIA's help. They can just make up these lies now and go with it, he added. The extent to which the government directly manufactures popular culture, however, is far from limited to just one agency. So let me just bring in John Kiriakou to speak a little bit about this. And Kurt also, who used to write for Sacha Baron Cohen. And what would you, so is it really as big a deal as they're making it out to be in this article, John?
No, not as it pertains to Sacha. No.
Okay.
The contact that Sacha had with the CIA was me, and I was already out of the CIA for almost 5 years when he called me, and God knows I'm on record as not being pro CIA. So that was a stretch. Now the other stuff is true. You know, you end up with films like Argo and Zero Dark 30. Zero Dark 30 is infamous now in this space because Catherine Bigelow rather, and Mark Bowl got classified briefings over a classified mock-up of the Bin Laden compound. They were able to interview active duty CIA officers. They didn't have to put their script through the CIA's pre-publication review process like everybody else does. So yeah, if things are going to be pro-CIA, the CIA is going to knock itself out to help and to make sure that you have everything you need.
Can I ask you a question, John?
Certainly.
That act, the Defense Act that he
Yes.
brought up, which I had never heard of until until just this article, was it illegal to do that before?
Yes.
And it made it legal?
Yeah, this is a big problem. And it happened almost accidentally. Until 2012, it was illegal to propagandize the American people, right? You can't have taxpayer money being spent to propagandize American citizens. The reason that ended is because we have a propaganda outlet called Radio and TV Marti, which beams propaganda to Cuba. Most of it is just baseball games. That's really what people want from the United States down there, is to be able to listen to Major League games in Spanish. But the problem was that the signal could be picked up in Southern Florida. So technically it was illegal to broadcast it. So what they did is they said, well, we're going to have to change this law. We can't propagandize the American people now, which means we're going to have to take down our anti-Cuba propaganda channels. If we just change the law to allow propaganda, then we can continue to broadcast to Cuba. So they changed the law, and now the CIA can spend millions of dollars on Hollywood movies to make themselves look like heroes and to make it look like torture led to the location of Osama bin Laden, which is a lie.
So how do they define propaganda specifically? You know, because doesn't that seem like it'd be a lot of things?
It's any information that is put out for the purpose of changing or affecting public opinion. Simple as that.
So how's that different from like advertising or something? Because the government's doing it?
Yeah, because the government's doing it. And, you know, it's not like, you know, buy this loaf of bread instead of that other loaf of bread. It is torture worked. Torture helped us find bin Laden. The Cubans are no good. We have to overthrow them. Russia's going to invade Ukraine, that kind of thing.
Do you think, are they like very, well, all right. So, wow, I had no idea that was a law that got passed. And so the world did end when
and think
the
about
man
it for a
said.
second too. That was an Obama administration.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that was the same NDAA authorization that he signed on New Year's Eve that also withdrew habeas corpus. Remember, was that 2011?
Yeah, that was earlier. Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
so that's another thing you probably don't know, Kurt, is that Barack Obama signed a National Defense Authorization Act, which repealed the habeas corpus, meaning that the government can detain you without charge or I mean that is so fundamental to liberty and freedom, that to be able to
America.
demand a court you have to get a trial. They can't just lock you up without a trial. Well, they got rid of that. That was in the Magna Carta. That's how long we've been living with this. But now we got rid of it. So now the United States is acting on a liberty view from somewhere around the 1100s. That's how backwards we are now. And no one gives a shit. It's just amazing. So
Well, I didn't know what habeas corpus meant for a good many years, so that's why I didn't care.
Yeah,
I was like,
well-
I don't care about that guy. Get him out of here. Send him back where he came from, to England then.
he's got a weird name anyway. Him and his buddy Phineas.
Habeas. Was he a
Habeas
Roman?
and Phineas and all these assholes. Get out of here. All right, so let's go back to this. Go ahead.
Just the thing about that car escape where he so I asked Aaron to introduce me to the writer because I wanted to ask him about it because I was curious, because that car escape thing, I was like, I didn't assume that was real when I watched the movie. And I could tell you from firsthand experience, they're not going to break the law if they don't have someone telling them, this is how you can do it. A lot of these pranks, and I'm not even, I bet Punk'd and any other prank show, they got to go through all kinds of hoops. We had one with the guys that thought they were going to kidnap illegal immigrants and send them back over the border with a fake quinceañero to lure them in, and one of the guys came back with a gun later.
Oh.
And, like, wild stuff happens, and because he recognized the cop badge, that we had cops, but legally we couldn't have them on duty. And Sacha was like, "Oh, can we get real cops?" Like he's more gung ho to doing what he can for real, and everybody's like, "We can't do that. That's a dangerous thing to do." But what ended up happening was the fake badge, Hollywood badge that the real cop had on, the guy recognized it because he's one of these like militia kind of, was into that kind of stuff. So they know all cop stuff, and he knew it wasn't a real badge, and he was embarrassed, and he came back, and then that cop ended up intercepting him, talking him down, and took him to have a beer and made everything smooth. But it was wild. Like,
wow.
Even trying to, like, so those are cops that are in on it that are not working in official capacity, and all the T's are dotted. It's still dangerous shit can happen with something like that. The thing for a movie, you're trying to make a movie out of this stuff, it's hard because half the pranks end up just being person looks at you being weird. The good ones are you get them to act with you and improv. That's what's funny about it. Not so much like, to me, like humiliating someone. The funny thing is when they don't know they're in a play and they start acting, but you can't always get that. So you have to put it in a movie, parts like that, like an escape or just something. Borat didn't really try to kidnap Pamela Anderson, So I don't get why that's like a big deal at all.
Okay. All right, well, let's get back to what this article said. It says, the extent to which the government is directly manufactures popular culture, however, is far from limited to just one agency. The Department of Defense has been involved in the production of at least 814 movies and 1,133 television shows, including many of the most successful titles and series. People have Nick Cruz from the Fred Hampton Leftist says all the time, America is the most propagandized country in the world, and they have no idea. And I'd have to agree with that. This is what the article says, the casual demonization of Arabs and Muslims has led to much criticism of Baron Cohen's work as anti-racist on the superficial level, but perpetuating gross stereotypes and contempt for the people of Western Asia. Sina Ramani, an academic and host of the East is a Podcast, a show about Orientalism, I don't know if you could even say that word, in popular culture, was especially critical of Baron Cohen's casual racism and how it is used to bolster Western objectives in the Middle East, telling MintPress, this isn't rocket science. He, Sacha Baron Cohen, very likely has some connections, and that's how he gets all this amazing access, only to claim to be some kind of Andy Kaufman-esque genius. While a lot of people fall for this, underneath it all, it is all just your run-of-the-mill white supremacist race play.
Who's the guy that said that?
And this is some guy from that podcast. This guy Sina Ramani from the East is a Podcast. He's saying this, and then he said. Consider The Dictator, Sacha Baron Cohen's 2012 satire of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Look how they spell Gaddafi. I always spell it with a Q. The timing of the production could hardly be more conspicuous and useful for the United States and Israel interest. Written and filmed at exactly the same time as NATO was working with jihadists to overthrow the leader that had constantly been a thorn in the West Side. The movie features some of the crudest Islamophobic stereotypes seen anywhere on television, and Muslims are presented as interested only in killing Americans or molesting women, while the dictator himself is working on developing nuclear weapons to use against Israel. The Dictator was released just after the real-life Gaddafi was publicly executed by Western-backed jihadists who control the country to this day and have turned it into a failed state replete with open-air slave markets. The Dictator is essentially an Israeli-American imitation of a crass stereotype borrowed almost directly from the low-budget action military movies that proliferated through the 1980s and 90s. Ramani says, ultimately, it comes down to a very profound cultural Islamophobia, which can be turned on and off as needed, and those deeply radicalized sentiments built up over time and crystallized as foreign policy through invasions and regime change wars. So what do you think about that, John? You're the specialist. Do you think that that's happening, that the CIA or the intelligence community would be encouraging or push or or kind of making it okay for him to do that sort of thing where they stereotype Arabs and other people like that the United States needs as enemies?
You know, I don't agree with that. I think maybe Sina Rahmani has missed the subtlety of his humor. For example, do you remember at the very end of, I guess it was Borat, it was one of the outtakes. He was in a bar in Arizona, and he started singing this song, "Throw the Jew Down the Well so my country can be free." And the next thing you know, everybody in the bar is singing "Throw the Jew Down the Well." Well, he did that on purpose. He did that as a statement against anti-Semitism,
Right.
as an effort to expose white supremacy. And, you know, I don't have to tell you guys, it takes ages to put a film together, to write it and film it and edit it and then post-production. And when he was making The Dictator, nobody knew that Hillary Clinton was was planning to overthrow Gaddafi. And I would add another thing too. When I was still at the CIA, this would have been like 2002, I guess, 2003, the deputy director of the CIA made a secret trip to Libya and said, look, we're invading Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't. But we're invading Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction. You can live or you can die. And if you want to live, you're going to turn all your weapons over to us. And Gaddafi did it.
He did it.
He did it. And another thing about Gaddafi is Al-Qaeda and the Muslim extremists, the jihadists, they hated Gaddafi as much as they hated us. Right? They hated Saddam Hussein as much as they hated us because there was nothing Muslim about those guys. Nothing. They were statists. They were national socialists.
They were secular.
They were secular. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I
go ahead.
feel like Sima Rahmani, I have to say the name correctly, missed the point, I think.
And boy, it would be a much more sexier story if he didn't. If he was telling the truth, it'd be great. What did you want to say, Kurt?
Yeah, I'll tell you what was bugging me about the article overall is the thing about the CIA direct. This kind of makes it sound like they're handing him a script that they wrote for him to say. That's what kept like rubbing me the wrong way with it. That's why I want to ask the guy, because I'm like, is that what you think it is? Because it's not like that. He's very he's basically a rich neoliberal guy. I mean, that is what he is. Like many Hollywood people.
Yeah.
He probably rubs shoulders with all kinds. I mean, I know he does for a fact. He's told us some funny rumor that he heard about Trump was having a hard time in the Oval Office because he couldn't get. He's used to getting like hookers whenever he wants, and he couldn't. He made some joke about he's probably humping the holes on the golf course. You know, he talks to people, and he's not like he's a true believer in it. Like he's a very dedicated Israeli guy,
Yes.
or towards Israel in a which. I used to date an Israeli girl. That's how people from Israel are a lot of the time. And I don't think he would be saying anything he himself didn't think. You know, like I don't think the thing about this,
well, he certainly he certainly was a big Russia-gator. He certainly is a big defender of Israel. He certainly repeated the CIA talking points on Syria and Assad and gas attack. So I know that about Sacha. So maybe they don't. It's like they don't have to pay him to do something he's doing for free. He's going to do it for free anyway.
Right. And then the thing about I love the blaming comedy for the thing that is basically first of all, the serious news are the ones that fail first.
Yeah.
And this is why people hate the left too. This is why before Barry Crimmins and Jimmy Dore and all these people, I also hated lefties because I don't know who made up this nonsense that comedy is a form of punching. You could punch up or down. That's not what comedy is. Comedy's medicine. You understand? It's medicine for the dissatisfied. So if you take the wrong medicine, maybe it will hurt you or your feeling. But it's for different things. He's a guy from money who went to Oxford who's like a smartass. Okay, so he's got like the medicine is boredom for like up the upper end of the political class. The bottom end, that's where you get oppression and all the other things because that's what you need it for. Like Monty Python is the comedy of people that are bored because they went to Oxford. It's not people that are, and they also know some things in Life of Brian. I would say still holds up, actually better than ever now. But that's their type of humor. So I really liked writing for him because he reminded me of Mel Brooks. Like he was like, and that kind of Mel Brooks sensibility that I like. He's a society dude too, so that stuff doesn't always jive. So there's a bunch of things where he's just being a funny, like, smart aleck, but he has social obligations to be like, this is a larger thing. That's why you see him making all these statements now, like, we've got to stop. Like who's the guy from the Gong Show that was so ashamed he had to lie and say he was a CIA assassin?
Chuck Barris.
Yeah, it's like all these people, when they're big enough, go through this period where they're suddenly, because they can't get, it's like they think it's like the funny is like some inherently moral thing that it's not. And what do you talk about always? Integrating your dark, like they haven't integrated that idea that something might be funny because it's funny. And then that nonsense of mixing it with like, I'm doing an important thing for, that's where that all comes from. But I will say this, if they did want to use him as a secret agent, he would be a good guy to use if he wasn't like famous, because he's like, it's amazing the skills he has. And when he gets into character, he's gone.
He's
like
fearless. Yeah, you're right.
Character Sacha is fearless. Regular Sacha is the most, he doesn't do any substances, just like a real, like a nice Jewish boy, family man with doesn't go around his wife or anything. So that's a good, right? You can get into a lot of things with a record of never having done any kind of drugs. And he's smart. And he, like, I said hello to him in his billionaire costume one time for Geo, the guy that was getting celebrities. And he looked at me, it was so crazy, the look that I got. And I went and asked one of the other guys there. I'm like, what? I just said, like, hey to Sacha. He goes, oh, do you like look right through you? That thing. And I didn't even really know what people meant by that until that, like, because that's what it was. And he's gone. When he gets a character, he's the thing, like 100%. Yeah. I mean, he probably saved his life in a James Bond situation.
Yeah. Let me just, so I just think by the way, when you talk about punching up, punching down, Kurt, we do sell a T-shirt at the Jimmy Dore Show called "Keep Punching Up." So I appreciate you ruining that for us.
Oh, I thought that was a UFC thing. No, everybody says it. That spread like wildfire. That idea.
Yeah. Anyway, no, but it's very. I understand what you're saying. Yes, comedy isn't. It's just it's medicine. I never heard that before. You never said that to me before. I don't know why.
Patrice is the first guy that I ever heard say it while he was bombing at a Mohegan Sun thing.
Oh yeah,
he's yelling at the crowd. He goes, "It's medicine."
Okay. So anyway, it just goes on to highlight how he's very pro-Israel. That he's idolizes Shimon Peres, traveling to meet him in 2020, stuff like that. The pro-Israel propaganda was turned up to 11, however, in The Spy. In 2019 miniseries drama, Baron Cohen produced himself and played the title character. Directed by former IDF paratrooper Gideon Raff, The Spy lionizes Mossad agent Eli Cohen, who goes deep undercover, embedding himself in Syrian high society, providing intelligence to the Jewish state crucial for its victory in the 1967 Six-Day War against its neighbors. To this day, Israel illegally occupies Syrian and Palestinian land captured in 1967. The series is a relentless celebration of Mossad and Israel, contrasting them with the barbarity of their neighbors. As the Daily Dot's review of the show commented, the overriding message was Cohen good, Syrians are evil. The Washington Post also noted that The Spy was a central part of a wider Mossad recruitment drive. Eli Cohen was a real historical figure and a hero to many of the most passionate Zionists. Sacha remarked that he sees himself in Eli and claimed that what they do is rather similar.
It is.
So there you go. That's the end of that story.
Oh, and well, dude, it is. When I worked there, it felt like I was part of we had Joe Arpaio.
Boy.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy to be mocking Joe Arpaio, but we're in another room observing and watching what he's doing with them, like it was some kind of surveillance thing, like I'm sure they get consultants. He really believes Syria. Like I thought it was actually odd at the time when we were doing Who's America, because the go-to joke Dictator. And by the way, that Gaddafi thing, I promise they were only using Gaddafi specifically to say I'm African, not Arab, because he is very, doesn't want to get stuff coming up. So that's the Gaddafi part, is Arab. All the thing about ready to blow up Israel, they're mostly you could tell they're probably talking about Syria or Iran or whatever. That's why it's a pastiche. The Gaddafi part is plausible deniability when the inevitable thing of you're going after Arabs. Like he would go, I'm African. I didn't work from them, but I'll bet you anything that's what that is.
I'm sure that's true.
And then it was odd to me just because I didn't, you know, I know the refugee thing was happening at the time. That's what we had a lot of bits about. And we had a thing where would you go to Assad's birthday and entertain him? Remember all the stuff was coming out about how celebrities, you ever see the old footage of Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn at Putin's birthday? So those Hollywood people and Putin singing Blueberry Hill and they're all like clapping and sing. We watched that before we made this sketch. And so he would, but I remember it being Assad, I always just thought was odd because like he wasn't really I didn't know anything about Syria. That wasn't like there's a lot of astroturfing to try to make Syria, you know, more than even the Ukraine astroturfing. Like I care about that. So I always thought that was odd, but I took it as all his rich friends, and he was just in Israel. We got that Mossad character from probably whoever his consultants were out there. They're telling him Syria's this or that. I'm sure he believes every word of it.
I'm sure he believes it too. Yes, I know. I'm sure they all do. I mean, all those Hollywood guys believe all that shit the CIA tells them. Right, yeah. John, have you ever worked with anybody else in Hollywood besides Sacha?
Yeah, I worked on the film The Kite Runner. That was my first one. I did Kill the Messenger. I did the Third Bourne movie.
Now, were you acting as an official CIA person or just an ex-CIA?
No.
Ex-CIA.
All of it's after my CIA time. You know, what most of them wanted to know was they would give me the script and say, read this and tell us if CIA people really talk like this.
Okay.
And, you know, in most cases, they don't. I did one, it was a John Travolta film, From Paris with Love. Absolutely dreadful, awful, terrible film where they're driving around Paris, like shooting out of car windows with machine guns, and then they'll stop and snort a line and then, you know, go to the station and talk about what they just accomplished. It's like literally none of it was true. Some of these other ones though were really good. Like in Kill the Messenger, they wanted to know exactly how cocaine got from Central America to the United States during the Contra War. Sacha had very, very specific questions for me. What he wanted to do in the beginning was there was a scene. Well, first of all, he wanted to film in the Middle East, in an Arab country, and I said that's easy. We can go to Syria, we can go to Libya, we can go to Jordan. He said he doesn't want to go to Syria; it's an enemy country. I said that's cool. I said, we have some contacts in Libya, and the Libyans are dying to do a movie there, right? This is right before Gaddafi was overthrown. And he said that as a Jew, he would feel uncomfortable going to Libya. He didn't want to, you know, risk anything. And I said, well, we can go to Jordan. That's kind of the easy one. We have fantastic contacts in Jordan. And he said, no. He said, nobody can be in on the gag. So what he wanted, and this was in our first meeting, he said he wanted to get bona fide terrorists in the room, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, like bona fide bad guys. And he wanted to show them Polaroids of men having anal sex and ask them if it constituted torture and should these men be sent to Guantanamo. And I said, I thought that was a terrible idea. I said, the religious types, you can't mess with the religious ones. I said, they'll kill you, they'll kill your crew, they'll go out in the street and kill people who remind them of you. And he said, well, this is like an integral part of the film. We're going to have to figure something out. I said, well, there are still terrorists in the region who were communists, you know, shooting up airports in the 70s. And they're all still there. They're old men, but they're bona fide terrorists. They all live in Syria. And he said, well, if you can get me these guys, then we can do it. And I said, well, we can go to Damascus together and shoot it in Damascus. And he said, no, he wanted to bring them to Amman. And I said, but Sacha, I said, the Jordanian intelligence service is one of the best intelligence services in the world. If we have terrorists flying into Amman from Damascus on the same day, coming to your hotel room, do you think that's not going to come to the attention of the Jordanian service? And he said, nobody can be in on the gag. So he flew to Amman with a cameraman, just the two of them. I was supposed to follow a couple of days later. And he told me later that when he arrived, there was a guy standing with a sign that said Sacha Baron Cohen. And he said to the cameraman, John's contact got us a car. Well, I hadn't gotten him any car. So he says, I'm Sacha Baron Cohen. And they follow the guy to this limo. He gets in the limo and they start driving. And it occurs to him that something might be wrong. And he says to the driver, where are we going? And the driver says, we're going to the Royal Palace. His Majesty is a big fan. And he says they pull in, these enormous iron gates open. They pull into the palace, and here's the king standing there. He gets out of the car. The king shakes his hand. He says, Sacha Baron Cohen, I'm your biggest fan. Borat, I almost peed my pants, he says. If you need anything while you're here in Jordan, I want you to call my chief of staff. He'll take care of any problems you have. And I said, you see, they knew you were coming to Jordan before you even bought your ticket. And so he finally got in with these terrorists that I got. I just went to the Damascus telephone book. They're actually listed in the Damascus telephone book. They're just tired old men now. So we got 3 of them to fly in, and he shows them the Polaroids of these guys having anal sex. And he said what he wanted was for them to leap across the table and, strangle Bruno. Instead, these guys look at the pictures and they're like adjusting their glasses and their bifocals and trifocals. And then one of them says, no, this no good. This haram, no good. And hands it back to him. And then that was it. It was a bust.
All that work for nothing.
All that for nothing.
Yeah, that's how a lot of stuff goes. You gotta it's very hard to get usable material. When you consider the risking your life involved too, it's really something else.
He said though, he went from Jordan to Jerusalem. He drove, and he said it was the only time that he broke character because he wore these leather boots that came up to the mid-thigh and pink hot pants and a shirt that he tied at just above the belly button.
Right.
And he went to the Western Wall, and he said there was a rabbi there with some yeshiva students, and the rabbi spat on him and called him a dirty faggot. And he said these students just started wailing on him.
Oh yeah, they told me. Yeah, he told me that.
Yeah, and they beat the hell out of him, and he had to break character and say, "No, it's a joke. It's for a movie. It's not for real. I'm not gay." And they had to actually stop filming for a few days for his black eye to go down.
This article had, that's why, because the guy in this article had a thing. It was like, well, there's no evidence of that happening, and that's why I want to talk to him. Like, dude, I've seen wild things happen. I know stuff does happen. Like, it really is like, if me and him I told you we got an argument. We got one argument where he made me leave the room because they had one sketch about Antifa and Who's America. That, by the way, I think is the least funny one on the whole thing. And it was like to see if some guy would press a button that would give an Antifa a heart attack at a march. So this is before you were hearing about them all the time, okay? But I knew about them because I know people that got beat up by them who were up until that point on their side for nonsense. And he just literally didn't know. He goes, it's just lesbians. I'm like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. I wouldn't know except for what he goes, well, what's wrong with punching? Is when that punching a Nazi thing was coming out?
That's
he
right.
goes, what's wrong with punching Nazis? And he didn't even let me finish when I started telling him what the problem is. I had to leave the room. But the problem is, first of all, if Nazis become that big a problem, we're not going to punch them. We're going to probably shoot them. So punching's kind of stupid. You're not taking out the Nazis out of the equation with the punch. And also, you don't have to be a Nazi for them to punch you. They'll just call you that after the fact. He has no, it's like any Hollywood person that thinks they know. And why wouldn't they think that if they talk to all the most important people in the world all the time?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well,
I agree with you that he's very mainstream neoliberal. He's very Rachel Maddow in his worldview, and he happens to be Israeli.
Yeah, right.
Zionist.
Yeah. Right. So he's very pro-Israel as a result. So yeah, it looks like he would be working for the CIA, but I think he's doing that for free. That's just the way he
Yeah.
thinks.
How
But
much do they have to really push stuff?
Not-
I mean,
not much.
Zero Dark 30 though did stand out. Where I was like, that's weird that a Hollywood thing is so pro waterboarding. I
Yeah.
think they didn't like that.
I didn't
Yeah.
see that movie, but we got to move on. But I appreciate John. Thank you so much for coming on.
Good to meet
John,
you, man.
John
Thank you
Kiriakou.
both. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, where can people find you, John?
Let's see. I'm on Sputnik. The show is called Political Misfits, and Facebook, Twitter, John Kiriakou, at John Kiriakou, all the usual places.
Okay. Hey, we're doing live stand-up shows in Los Angeles, February 5th, February 12th, February 18th, February 20th, we're in Philadelphia, and then February 26th, back here in Los Angeles in Studio City at our 60-seat theater. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets, and while you're there, become a premium member, get access to all our premium content.